think our society wants us to rush around. And even within chiropractic, so many of the coaches, especially the old school coaches, it's like, how many people did you see today? Like
Mhm.
150, you need to see more. Like I would probably die if I saw that many patients in a day. Like that's so much energy for me. So it's slowing it down. And I had a professor one time in my PhD program say, slowness is a revolutionary act. It's an act of cultural resistance. And that has stuck with me years now. And I think the feminine lies within that of just taking that time to slow down a little bit, and being more present and witnessing what's happening around us and sharing stories, sitting in community, in circles, and
Welcome back to Shine In and Out, the space where science meets soul. I'm your host, Sammy Stoltz, and I am a biomedical and neuroscience researcher and life coach exploring how biology, psychology, and spirituality intertwine to shape our healing and human potential. Today, we're joined by Dr. Elizabeth Wisniewski, a doctor of chiropractic medicine, a somatic educator, and a PhD in somatic depth psychology. She helps individuals and organizations lead with embodied clarity and compassion. As a visually impaired leader, Dr. Elizabeth brings a rare, deeply felt wisdom about perception, not just through sight, but through presence, empathy, and energy. Together, we'll explore what it truly means to lead from the body, how to balance the nervous system in a world that glorifies dysregulation, and how embodiment bridges the science with our spirit. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that your nervous system is also listening. Every heartbeat, every inhale, every micro tension in the shoulders, your body is collecting data. Your autonomic nervous system, divided into the sympathetic accelerator and the parasympathetic brakes, is constantly regulating your internal state. And modern science now shows that our thoughts, our breath patterns, and our emotional awareness can literally reshape how these systems communicate in real time. So then, in that sense, leadership isn't just a mental thing, it's physiological. And Dr. Winooski calls this embodied intelligence, when the body and the awareness align to create authentic presence. So with that in mind, let's jump right in. So Elizabeth, I like to start with where you came from, how you got to where you are today. You've spent over 2 decades bridging chiropractic medicine, psychology, somatics. What first led you down this path?
sure. So thanks so much for having me here. I just want to say first, and I'm Dr.
My
Elizabeth
pleasure.
Wisniewski, and yeah, it's so exciting. I am a doctor of chiropractic, but I also have a PhD in somatic depth psychology. So what got me into this is so wild to me when I think back, and it feels like a different lifetime, even though it's so interconnected. I thought I was going to be an environmental attorney and actually double majored in undergrad in environmental studies and political science. So pretty different, pretty far from what I'm doing now in some respects, but not completely.
Yeah.
And growing up, I got diagnosed when I was around 6 with a really rare retinal eye disease, and I could see growing up, but I started having all these surgeries to keep the retinas flat from so they wouldn't detach anymore, and just to keep the blood vessels stable. So my childhood, there was a lot of looking back, what I would call medical trauma, even though I went to
Mm.
an amazing retinal specialist who was one of the top doctors in the world for it. He was great, but it's still a lot as a child to go under anesthesia 45 times.
Oh my
That's a lot
gosh.
on your body. Yes.
Yeah.
So that was the big part of my childhood. And I could see until I completely out of both eyes until I was 14 and I was at swim practice. And all of a sudden I went in for a flip turn and then it was just black, like a curtain dropped.
No way.
And my retina detached. And then 5 weeks later, my other retina detached. So I couldn't open my eyes because when you have major surgery like that, it takes a while for the body to be able to like allow your eyes to reopen. And so
Oh.
during that time, I'm a freshman in high school and I'm taking things like geometry, which is very visual.
Yeah.
And right? So my mom, she was a special ed teacher. She put together these pegboards with rubber bands so I could feel it and do the theorems that way. But this whole time, what I haven't mentioned is my mom had breast cancer, and my freshman
Oh.
year was the third time. So my freshman year of high school, my mom actually passes away after
Oh,
I've
I'm
had all
so
these
sorry.
surgeries. But that's already a really hard age. And so I keep chugging along and I can see still fine out of my left eye. And then I go off to college and I do this double major and I study abroad 3 times. And I'm so passionate about environmental justice and doing all this really cool work throughout Latin America and all throughout the Western Hemisphere, actually. And I really truly believe like I'm going to change the world. I'm going to be an environmental attorney. And a week after undergrad, 21 when I graduate. I go back home to Michigan for my 30th surgery. And this time it's a cornea transplant. So my retinal specialist is there, but he's not really doing the surgery. And I wake up and I feel in every cell of my being something's really wrong and I'm in a lot of
No.
pain. And the surgery didn't go well, and there's so much scar tissue. So at that point, I lose my vision in my left eye, and I was promised I was gonna get more sight back, and so it's
Oh.
really heartbreaking, and I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I'm sitting at my dad's house, and my dad at this point remarried a widow, and we have this big Brady Bunch family, and it's great. But I'm there with my dad and stepmom, and I hear a commercial for medical massage school, and so I decided I'm going to do the 6 month program there, which turned into 12 months and almost 1,300 hours of training. But a
Hmm.
couple weeks in, I went to my dad and I just had this heart to heart where I'm like, thanks for paying for undergrad. I'm going to go in a different direction. And he got it. I told him I think I'm meant to be a chiropractor.
Hmm.
And I had to go back and all these science classes because I had a BA, not a BS. And so
Mhm.
here I am taking physics and chemistry and having to, do all this mental math. But I already knew from 7 years prior with my mom how to advocate for myself, how to meet objectives in a different way from the course syllabus, how
Mhm.
to propose, like maybe we build this model and I can feel it or whatever it may be. So I had this background and was able to advocate and get through all my science recs and then go to chiropractic school.
I'm so glad you had your mom as an advocate and the creativity to figure out how to do it in a different way. That is, and I'm sure all of the teachers that you worked with were better teachers for it, for their future students.
I and not all of them would always admit that, but I certainly have so many come to me over the years and be like, "You helped me teach in a
Mhm.
better way or in a different way." Because not every person is a visual learner, but we
Mhm.
often teach that way. And so we need to
Oh
get
yeah.
into the kinesthetic, somatics, auditory. And for me, I still at times I'm a very visual learner and I see it in my mind's eye, and that's confusing for people. I had sight so long that I still like I dream like I can see still, and that's where
Mhm.
I visualize so much. So then moving forward, I moved down to Southern California from the Bay Area, where I went to Cairo school, start a practice, and then slowly start taking more and more classes on pregnancy, perinatal, pediatrics, and moving in that direction, and end up on a kind of a whim, but this is how I go with life though, and I follow that flow. Every school I've gone to that I don't recommend this, I've committed to before ever visiting. Kind of weird,
Wow.
but I really trust my intuition of like, this is what I'm meant to do. And this one was silly because it was in basically the same town I lived in Santa Barbara at the time. And I decided to go to Pacifica Graduate Institute. And I'd met with a friend who was a PT who was finishing that program at the time for coffee. We were networking. A week later, I called her. I was like, I filled out the application, I interviewed, and I got in, and then I started. And so, a 6 year journey of master's into PhD while practicing and writing my dissertation during the pandemic. So it was a lot, but it was in somatics, in depth psychology. So that's all based on Carl Jung, C.G. Jung's work, getting into the body, the unconscious, the feminine, all these things we don't necessarily want to talk about. And then what led me into my research on C-section was really cool because you'll have to find a gap in the research for dissertation writing. And that
Mm-hmm.
can be challenging because you're like, oh, all these things have already been covered, even though there's a lot of opportunities still out there. And people started showing up in my practice postpartum. I'd not seen them prenatally, and they'd all had unplanned C-sections, and they weren't touching their scar. They wouldn't touch their abdomen below that or engage with that lower part of their body. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
producing milk. And so I was like, what's happening? They seem dismembered. How can I help them remember their whole and complete and help
Mm-hmm.
them make meaning of their experience? And that's what led to my research because nobody had been writing about somatics and depth psychology and that intersectionality with even holistic health like chiropractic. So I laid the foundation with my dissertation research around C-section. And that's what
Wow,
got me to this moment now.
that's incredible. I,
Thank you.
I loved what you said about remembering because so much of
Mhm.
our healing is, I, I believe that throughout our whole lives, society tells us all of these things, our parents, our everybody that we interact with, and we think we know things based on that. But really, I think healing is about remembering who we are beneath all of those implanted beliefs, if that makes sense. Um,
Absolutely.
so
Finding a
so
sense of wholeness.
remembering, yeah, that's so
And
awesome.
I like to put that hyphen on this re-hyphen membering. It's like, let's really bring it back to the body, the soma, and our first person lived subjective experience of the body. That's where it can be so profound.
Wow. So you talked about intuition, and I love learning about how people tap into that because when you were talking about your school, I probably would have never imagined doing that in the past, but as I've gotten more in touch with my intuition, that's how I feel about Stanford. I've never even been in the area and I just feel it. I feel that it's the right place to be. So I get it now, but were you always in tune with your intuition?
I think so, yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
and I couldn't name it necessarily, but as I lost more sight gradually, I dropped in, and I feel like a big part of my mission in this lifetime is to help people when the world wants you to space out, teach people how to space in and
Oh,
tap into that vision because they want us to numb out and,
yeah.
scroll and do these things. But it's those moments, that's what somatics really is like being mindful of your experience and noticing what's happening inside your body, outside your body, and where your body is in time and space. And so those are those pillars, underpinnings of somatics. And so I think I always was because I would paint and draw, and I
Hmm.
learned to read by the time I was 3. So I think I was like really trying to get everything in that I could see. And even
Hmm.
as a really young child, I look at photo albums from before I was even born and cry. And my parents were like, what's going on with this child?
Hmm.
But I was absorbing so much of it into my mind's eye, into my psyche, into my soma is really what I believe. And I've done a lot of healing, from Western therapy, EMDR, somatic space, but also working with shaman and just making sense of my life experience
Yeah,
because it's not easy to lose your eyesight.
of course not.
And it is still hard. There's days where I'm like, just give me 1 minute and I can get all this done.
Yeah.
But trying to be grounded within it takes time and practice. So I think intuition's the same thing. It's practice because we all have that ability, but how we experience it might be different. Like I feel it deep in my heart, kind of between my heart and my solar plexus. So
Mhm.
I call it my fierce green fire. And this is coming from Aldo Leopold, the naturalist, his work where he was about to shoot this wolf. This is in the 20th century, like actually the turn of the 19th, 20th century is in the Midwest. And he was about to shoot this wolf and he looked into her eyes and saw a fierce green fire and put that gun down and didn't kill the wolf. And that really, since I read that when I was 18, has stuck with me. I'm like, I have that fierce green fire. So when I feel something, I feel it in my core of like, this is an embodied yes, Or
Mm.
if I'm like, "Ugh, I don't like how this feels," that's an embodied no, and I need to follow that.
Totally. I completely agree, and I was literally just I talk about it all the time, but I was talking about it last night that we are so brilliant and such creative beings, and we have everything that we need inside of us, but when we are distracting ourselves with our media and literally anything but sitting with ourselves in silence, we lose so much of that power. And I mean, I guess I had my own journey with my body, trying not to be in it because I was dealing with chronic pain and I didn't want to
Mhm.
focus on it, didn't want to think about it. Um, but uh, there is such a power. I now have that I can't ignore it, the feeling inside. Like it's mine's like, yeah, solar plexus, chest, and I can't do anything that causes discomfort in that area. And when something is good, it is so good that I'm like bouncing off the walls. So
Yeah.
it's very powerful, but you have to be open to feeling that. So as a somatic practitioner, what do you think of pain? What do you think our nervous systems are trying to tell us
Mhm.
when we experience chronic pain?
I think we need to be in relationship with it, and that can be really challenging and really heartbreaking. My dad has chronic regional pain syndrome, CRPS, from a botched ankles fusion. And so witnessing him go through that has been really profound for me because it's created this really deeply spiritual experience for him. And it's interesting for me to watch as a doctor and everything because I don't see a lot of chronic pain in my office because I'm dealing with for pregnancy and seeing
Mm.
lots of babies, which is really sweet. But when I do encounter it, it's coming into that relationship with it. And my dad, he's like, I'm gonna go on this walk or this hike, and it hurts. Every step hurts. But if I don't do it, I'm not gonna be able to. And
Mhm.
so just like transmuting that pain into a sense of empowerment, which again, going back to the solar plexus apparently today. And um, just recognizing that, talking to it, with my eyes, I'll write poetry like to my eyes or music, I'll write a song
Oh.
about it. And that's how you can be in a relationship with it. Maybe you paint it. Like I'll sometimes paint and I won't even know what colors I'm grabbing. I'll ask someone later, but I just go by the energy. And it's always
Hmm.
divinely perfect what I grab.
Yeah.
And so it's just like using the artistic somatic expression can be really, really helpful. In cases of a traumatic birth, which is definitely my wheelhouse, I'll have people, I'm like, write your story, share your story, dance it out, grab some crayons, like what you can do to get it up and out of the tissues because it's your 70 trillion cells and we're holding on to that story. Let's pull it up and out. And it's still part of you, but that's how we can come into relationship with it.
That is so powerful. And there is such an element that people don't acknowledge. You can go to therapy for years and think you've healed yourself mentally, and that's all that there is, but there is a somatic remembrance of the
Mhm.
trauma and the pain. So when you see that in people, that maybe think they've done everything they could, but aren't feeling satisfied with their healing, what do you recommend to them?
For scholarly reasons and other reasons, I don't love this book, but I think it's a good access point. Is The Body Keeps the Score. I think
Mhm.
people that's, accessible for the public in a lot of ways. I think we can go a lot deeper than that and more
Mhm.
into a divine feminine aspect as well. But that kind of helps people understand that they're holding it. So when I'm in a patient appointment, I don't want people to be in physical pain, but I'm not focused on a pain scale. I'm like,
Mhm.
I'll ask questions like, what are you noticing in your body right now? Where are you noticing that? So it's like different questions that almost have like a qualitative nature.
Yeah. I think those are hard
So
for
I think
people.
they are. And my research, my dissertation was qualitative as well. And people think that's easier, grabbing, collecting stories, but you have to code it. It takes a long
Yeah.
time. So I did interpretive phenomenology analysis, IBA. And so it was all this making meaning of their meaning, making experience.
Mhm.
It was a lot, but just witnessing. Yeah. And so I think that people, they'll come in and then you'll notice like they're still angry. They're like, "Well, I've done all this work and everything,"
Uh,
but you got to get under that surface and find that entry point. So when I'm working with a patient, like I'm gonna find any way to connect with them. Like, be like, "What kind of music do you like?" Like I'm gonna ask them questions that I can get this entry point to help them just relax and feel safe. But the other thing I do that I find is really powerful in my practice is I tell every new patient consent is ongoing. Consent can end at any time for any reason or for no
mm,
reason at all. This is a safe and sacred place. And that is where we can gain so much trust and understanding
mm,
and access what's happening in the psyche and the soma in a different way. And then I can suggest, like, have you tried somatic therapy? Because a lot of people are hearing about somatics at this point. It's becoming more mainstream, but they don't know what it means.
mhm.
So setting them up if they're going to do EMDR type therapy, let's get adjusted first. Let's downregulate your nervous system. Then you can receive what you're doing in a different way.
Mhm. Yeah, I did some EMDR myself. It's so
Mhm,
incredible. I think it compounds the positive results because you're using your body and your mind, and they're not disconnected. You shouldn't treat them separately. In the regard of your healing and your wellness, they're probably the two biggest things to look at, along with your emotions, of course. So, as a scientist and a doctor and somebody who values empirical data, um,
mhm,
how do you juggle the science with the soulfulness? Because
mhm.
it's kind of the like I want to get to the bottom of where science and soul mix and what that means because they clearly mix to me, but they're so mutually exclusive in every other, you know, writing in essence. So I would love to hear what you think about
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely. I think that's a really powerful, potent question. And I want to just like note something that you had just said before that question though about the mind and the body, because I really feel like Descartes did this huge
Yes!
disservice of right, I think therefore I
The
am.
dualism.
And crossing that Cartesian split, right? So I'm
Mhm.
always like body mind, they're both equal. I'm like, I'm always in the
Yeah.
body first. And because what Jung talked about, because when he was tapping into that, Jung talked about this thing I really love called the unholy trinity. And I was raised Catholic, so when I heard unholy trinity, I was like, "Ooh, tell me more. What's that?" And so Jung said it's the things we don't want to talk about in
Mm.
society because they're like what they would say in Women Who Run with the Wolves. It's like it's damp, it's
Oh,
moist, it's dirty. We don't want to talk about it. So it's
taboo.
he said, yes, exactly. Nailed it. And so it's the body, the feminine on the conscious. And so those are really scary things for us to go into in society, but we really need to. And that Cartesian split, I think, perpetuated it of mind over matter. And it's like, well, look at the etymology of matter. If we look at it from coming from Sanskrit, mata, it means mother. And
Mm.
so we need to have that connection instead of that split. And that is very helpful for healing when we give reverence for the body.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
The separation of the mind and body still prevails in medicine today, and I don't think that it's the future. I think the future is blending it all together and looking at a person as a whole and an individual. But yeah, we have to acknowledge that there's a big gap in modern medicine in that regard.
Yeah, I was just teaching guest lecturing at Lesley University this earlier this week in Cambridge in a holistic psych program talking about vitalism, which was prior to mechanism that happened at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and in the global north and in the west. And we really switched from everything's connected, everything has a soul spark. And it's kind of archetypal psychology as well, like Hillmanian psychology, but it's also that's vitalism. That's more than holistic health. It's all connected. I always tell my patients, we're all connected in the collective, and breath is the connective tissue of the living universe. So it's like when I'm working with I'm like having the parent take a breath too because they need to co-regulate. So it's all
Yeah.
connected. But sorry for that tangent, but I think it's really important to name.
No, I love
And
it.
okay, good. I was like, I really need to talk about this. But getting to your question, where I want to kind of access it is actually through something that's pretty mainstream with evidence-based healthcare triad. And so we do have that first pillar of being the research, the gold standard, albeit RCTs, randomized clinical trials, I really don't think should be gold standard in a lot of ways because
Yeah.
we're missing and you can't do that on everything. So they'll do chiro studies and they're doing sham adjustments. Like that's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
So I have
Agreed.
problems with that being the gold standard, but let's grab these case studies and series and collect other data and use qualitative as well and bring that back into the narrative right there, the narrative, right? Like but that's more going to be that feminine energy, the stuff Jung said we didn't want to talk about, and it's cut out of science. So bringing that back in. So we have the
Mhm.
research, so important. The next part is gonna be the clinical expertise. And so, I've been in practice, I've been a chiropractor 13 years. I've been doing body work for 19, so I have a lot of time of palpating, hands-on experience in my practice where I can be like, no, I don't feel safe with this. You need to actually go to the ER. I feel
Mm.
very confident. I can check my ego, and it's more important to me to know when not to adjust than to just adjust everything. So I'm
Yeah.
confident with that as a practitioner myself. But then that third pillar, here we can bring in some soul and some psyche, some soma, is going to be the patient preference. And are you
Mm.
feeling safe? Is this consent based? Is this trauma informed? Is this somatically informed? What am I noticing in my body? So it's like checking in with yourself on those aspects because you can then, if those are all embodied no's, move to a different practitioner. You can interview
Yeah.
doctors. That's okay.
Yeah. I
So
that
I
is
but we
well said.
helpful.
Yeah. I think people try to convince themselves like, "Oh, they're a good doctor, they're not gonna do anything to harm me." But if you have that gut feeling, it's even if nothing bad ever happens from it, it is worth it to put yourself in an environment where you do feel safe and comfortable. And I myself have been guilty of people pleasing, like staying with a doctor that I didn't feel was actually aligned, things like that. So obviously we can't blame people for doing that, but we can make it known that it shouldn't be the norm. And I really appreciate you
Yeah.
bringing that to the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially around birth of like, how are you
Mm,
gonna birth? How are you gonna go
that's
into this
huge.
primal space if you're not feeling safe? And what
Oh
I found
no.
in my research is that one of the four emerging topics that came out of my research was around clinical choice and expertise, where the person was like, I just gave all my power over to the doctor. I just trusted the doctor. And they didn't even create a birth plan or a birth vision because they're like, I'm
Mm,
just going to do whatever the doctor says. But
mm.
that's getting away from your soulful intention, your
Yeah.
psyche, your experience. So that's kind of how I access things. I really think that we can start tapping deeper into our lived experience through that sense of embodiment, like we were talking about. Spending time, and if you're really busy, there's still, you can have moments and it
Hmm.
could even be like, I'm going to wash the dishes and be so mindful and just breathe. Or, I have a Siberian Husky, so I try to be really present with him. Otherwise, he
Mm.
knocks my phone out of my hand with his paw. So, and I'm always like, you know what? You are right, Jaya. I need to be present. Those are moments of like grace, moments of ease for our body, and where we can tap in and just take a breath and like breathe in this experience right now in this moment. And I think that's where our soul can then connect a deeper way. And something I practice I learned from a shaman is anytime I get injured, if I stub my toe even, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a surgery necessarily. I call my soul fragments back to me, and I'm because there's these,
Yeah.
within shamanism, they believe in, in some traditions, those fragments are floating around you. And like you have this opportunity in hours or days to call them back to find wholeness. So even just as a
Huh.
practice, I envision all that coming back to me when I get injured because I'm like, and it doesn't have to be a physical injury. It could be like I might have hurt feelings,
Yeah,
but
that
I
was my
call
next
that back to
question.
me. Mhm. Yeah, because that that act of like, "Oh, okay, this is really affecting me. I'm gonna take this breath. I'm gonna call these pieces back to me. I'm gonna feel more connected then because I took a moment to recognize." The other thing I practice is putting brackets on something. If I'm really upset about something, I literally will set a timer on it of like, I'm gonna give myself this amount of time to be upset. I might hit snooze on it once or twice because I need a little more time, but I'm not gonna let it overtake me. And if
Yeah.
it's something really bad, maybe it's a day, but I had a really hard week this week, and I was like, "I have 3 minutes to cry." And I went and I did that, and then I washed my face, and then I was back to seeing patients, and I was okay, but it was bubbling up, and I'm a Cancer sign, so I'm, like, so sensitive, and I'm like, "I gotta get this out of me right now." And then I was, like, able to be present for another 3 hours of patient care.
Yeah. That is
So,
crying
you
is
know?
definitely a tool that people don't use enough. We avoid crying, whether it be for
Mhm.
weakness or for fear of vulnerability in front of others or for wanting to avoid a stuffy nose, any of those reasons. But every time I cry, it
Yes.
does. It releases calming neurotransmitters. It kind of forces your body to relax. And sometimes even the day after, if I have like a really big cathartic cry, the whole day after I am like
Yeah.
the most mellow version of myself. And I'm like, wow, like I am just
Right.
floating about this day. And it's a tool. Absolutely. I love that.
I like that you use the word floating too, because I'm just envisioning this like, sea and the sailing and the salt and you're floating in it and it's so good to release, like you said, with the
Yeah.
neurotransmitters and everything. I think that's really beautiful and it is a really potent experience, but it is so taboo as well.
Uh-huh.
So giving us our, that's that time to space in and pay attention to what we're noticing because I felt it in that same place, my fear screen fire space. It was bubbling up. I had a kid smash a toy into my face while I was
Oh.
adjusting, and they weren't paying, like they're a toddler. And
Mm.
it was right next to my eye, which triggers trauma for me of like,
Oh
is
yeah.
my eye gonna internally bleed? Am I gonna need to have another
Ugh.
surgery? And so that's really hard for me and I can't see it coming. So I was like, I need a few minutes and I found that gap and I was like, I gotta cry.
No, yeah. I see that's the beauty of knowing yourself too though, because if you weren't aware of what was going on inside of you, that you were triggered, that like somatically it had its own response, you might just be super irritable for the rest of the day. You might like if you weren't tuned in to yourself the way that you are, I think that's why so many people walk around angry or frustrated or it just yeah, it because if you don't take the time to understand yourself, that's how it's going to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. Just naming it even.
Yeah.
If you can go that far, you're doing it. You're practicing somatics. And then if you can go a little bit deeper, excavate a little bit more and like make meaning of or make that connection of like, I'm feeling this way because this happened. That's an even deeper level. But that all takes practice.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Um So I love how you were talking about how everything's connected and our breath and all of that.
Mhm.
Of course, all of these spiritual teachers, all of these religions, every single historical account of a spiritual enlightenment moment has to do with the breath and has to do with feeling a sense of oneness with the universe, with everyone, whether it's in the Bible, seeing God in everyone and yourself, all of that stuff. I think even if it's not based in empirical data, it is something repeatable that we have seen throughout history. And doesn't that make it just as valid as any other theory that we hold, in science, right?
I mean, I think, oh, right? It's reliable. We have reliability at least. Like, can the validity is there too? But
Replicability.
so, but it's like, well, can we do an RCT on this? I don't know. It's not a gold standard, and so that's what makes it so tricky. But it
Hmm.
has to be there. Like, otherwise, when I talk about somatics, when people are like, what's the difference between somatics and the body? Like, when you pass away and leave this body on the earth, that's your body. Your
Hmm.
soma's gone because your soma is that lived experience, subjective, first person experience of the body. But for me,
Hmm.
I feel like that's my soul too,
That's
my
what I was gonna
spirit,
ask.
however you look
Yeah.
at it. Yes, absolutely. I think it's in there. And, in some traditions, people think the soul's in the diaphragm. So we're, connected to breath, or the psoas muscle, which goes through the diaphragm. So it's interesting because I think it's definitely part of it, is how I look at it.
Yeah, I think the soul is a teacher. Like, it is the part of you that makes you act in a way that almost always forces you to face what you need to face to continue to heal. It's your lived experience. Some people believe it's your ancestral experience, maybe now more than ever with
Yeah.
the advent or the new science of epigenetics, the new discovery, I should
Mhm.
say. So, yeah, it's also incredible to me, and I'm so excited to be a part of this cohort of people that are seeing the value here. And I think it's only getting more and more mainstream, and I think it's going to help so many people. So thank you for what you're doing. I'd like to ask you mentioned the divine feminine a few times, and I know
Sure.
that people advocate for a balance between the feminine and masculine energies, regardless of your sex or gender. I'd like to hear more about that and why you think what it entails, what it looks like, and why you think it's so taboo to discuss.
Yeah. Well, I think it's taboo to discuss kind of like what we talked about, that unholy trinity earlier
Yeah.
from Jung, that it's mysterious, it's dark, it's damp, it's moist, it's dirty. So it's scary. So, but it shows up in practice, for me as a practitioner, of just being more present with patients, not wanting just metrics,
Mhm.
listening to stories, having longer appointment times.
Mhm.
My most of my appointments are at least 30 minutes long with my patients, and I'm like one-on-one working with them that whole time. It's not just like 2 seconds or 2 minutes. So having more time and space, that's how I show up in my feminine energy as a doctor every day. Um, and not looking at people's numbers, looking at them as a collection of stories and experiences.
Yeah.
Um, but I think our society wants us to rush around. And even within chiropractic, so many of the coaches, especially the old school coaches, it's like, how many people did you see today? Like
Mhm.
150? You need to see more. Like I would probably die if I saw that many patients in a day. Like that's so much energy for me. So it's slowing it down. And I had a professor one time in my PhD program say, slowness is a revolutionary act. It's an act of
Hmm.
cultural resistance.
Hmm.
And that has stuck with me years now. And I think the feminine lies within that, of just taking that time to slow down a little bit, you know, and being more present and witnessing what's happening around us and sharing stories, sitting in community, in circles, and within, I always go back to birth because that's my wheelhouse and my
Yeah.
research, of sharing birth stories, because women do that for millennia. But the feminine energy, like you said, any sex, any gender, we all have masculine, feminine energy. And so it's just like our body's trying to find homeostasis and find that balance. I feel like our energy body's doing that too. So we may one day be like, I'm in like my power suit. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to do this presentation. I'm going to be a boss bee. all of that, right? And then the next year, you're gonna be like, I'm gonna sip my tea and I'm gonna be a bit more present with what's happening and have a slower paced day. And it can wax and wane, and that's okay. But it's like trying to find that balance of how you show up and and being able to be more present, I would say. Not saying masculine energy can't be present, but I feel like there is a more softness to it. So it's hard
Yeah.
because it's like hard not to gender it. Um, but I think it's different for everybody. So like playing around with like, how do I feel in my body when I show up like, in a certain way? And so for me, if I'm having a really bad day, that's the day I'm like, I'm gonna get my makeup done, I'm gonna get my hair done.
Mm.
Like I do something different. Like for better, if I show up in a full face of makeup, I'm having a bad day. And so I'm trying to
Oh,
balance that out.
bad day, but looking
I don't
good.
know. I don't have any makeup on today. I feel great.
Perfect.
um so just very silly. But I think it's just different for everyone. And so it's hard to name it fully. But it's, in yoga, they call it the Sira and the Sukha, the effort and the ease. You're going to be more
Mm.
receptive or you're going to have more output. So I think it could boil down more to that.
I've been struggling with that balance actually lately in my life. I do think that the more masculine energy is that like straightforward business business mindset, always rushing. Like you said, I looked into being a doctor for a while, but the way that the system works
Mhm.
where you're forced to see them for 5 minutes at a time and you can't really connect with them and actually like form that bond where you're helping them so much more through that developed
Yeah.
trust. I didn't want to be controlled by a system like that because I know how I want to help people heal, and it is the slow way because that is how healing works. You can't force healing. So I love that slowing down is a revolutionary act in a cultural resistance. It's it's what we were talking about earlier
Yes.
too, though. Like when people are constantly distracted and not being one with themselves, they're scattering their attention through everything in their environment and more through their phones and whatnot. Um, it's something that I have struggled with lately because I've signed myself up for a lot, and a lot of it has to do with
Hmm.
production. So I'm taking medical biochemistry and health psychology. Love learning, love the classes, but
Mm.
now I have to produce. Also, like, not required whatsoever. I don't know why I did that while I have to apply for PhDs and I'm trying to run a business and working full time. So hilarious of me to do that, which I think
You
was,
sound like me.
yeah, yeah. I get pretty overeager and excited about doing these things, and maybe that is my masculine side feeling. Also my soma feeling like it always needs to be doing something to be productive and to be accepted or to be enough. So sitting can be very difficult. And every time I have this inherent gut feeling within myself lately that I am not taking enough time to sit with myself and that I'm going to burn out if I don't make that time. But it seems that every time I make that time, I get inspired by an idea and I go straight into like making action on it. Like the app that I'm trying to build, I get an idea for it and I'm going in and I'm programming right away when I could just be sitting there with my notebook, realizing that the ideas aren't going to go away, especially if I write them down, and continuing to sit with myself and allowing more of that creative flow to occur. So when you were talking about doing things physically with your body, like art and anything somatic, I think when you look at all of these cultures through all of history, the one thing that people have always done and continue to do that doesn't have a direct effect on the thriving of society is creating art. There's no direct outcome that makes it necessary, but that tells
Mhm.
us that we do it no matter what it is necessary for us to reset, to process. Like you were saying, you write songs, you write poetry to your eyes. Like, all of my most poignant poetry has come from processing through pain or difficult emotions. And every
Yeah.
time I do it, I feel better afterward. So maybe it's about finding
Mhm.
what works for you specifically, but I love that you make time to tap into yourself, whether it's feeling the emotions of the colors and the vibes. I love that. Just creating to create,
Yeah, I
not for an
just
outcome.
yeah, absolutely. This is so amazing. Like, while you were talking, I had this vision because when we were talking about EMDR earlier, I wanted to share, since I can't do the eye motions like they would want me to do, I
Mm.
held these little paddles that vibrated, but sometimes I tapped on my own legs, just like back and forth. So when you're talking about art, I'm thinking about so many cultures, most cultures are going to have drumming and
Yeah.
they're back and forth. And are they repatterning their brain that way?
Wow.
And what are they thinking about while they're doing that? And how's that helping them make meaning of their experience? And so that was what was like coming through so strongly of like,
Holy
yeah,
cow,
we're
yeah.
processing.
That's so profound. Absolutely. I actually had the vibrating handhelds myself in my experience, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Mm,
And it resonates very much, especially, the bongos. Like, my dad used to whip them out and just
yes.
play his little tune happy as ever. Like, something about creating music, something about, I don't know, that it's a beauty that needs to exist even if we don't have a direct reason to explain why. Um, it's helped us throughout all of history, all of our lives process, like you said. So I'm hoping from this episode a lot of people get the bug to create in any way that they see fit, and to be still and to be slow. That's an exciting notion to me. So you talk about these 5 pillars of embodied leadership. And as somebody who's trying to be a thought leader, I'd love to hear more about how I can be the best leader I can be, especially coming from embodying my full self. What are your pillars and what do they mean to you?
So my pillars are embodiment. Got to start there.
Mhm.
Empowerment, empathy, energy, and education. And so those came through because all my patients call me Dr. E because my last name Wisniewski is very long and Polish and hard for people to say. And so I became Dr. E and I resisted it for so
Ah,
long. And then finally I was like, surrender. I'm Dr. E. That's fine. And then these pillars came through. And even on
wow.
my my public Instagram, I mean like the broadcast channel is for embodiment. I'm playing around with all these different E words
Ah.
and making voice memo posts about that too, because just tapping it all back into that. And because it's like, like you can be really excited, you can feel that vibe.
Yeah.
But these
And your
are really
color
like get
is
into that.
green.
So
Emphasis on the E's.
yeah, yeah, I like it.
Your
Yeah,
soul fire.
I love that. I didn't even think about that. I love that. It's so true. And so tapping into that because we can be a better leader, whether it's in our family or business, just out in the world, more connected if we have that sense of embodiment. Like you have to start with that of just noticing, like, I'm noticing my breath is shallow. Okay, what can I do? Maybe I'm going to stretch my ear to my shoulder, release those scalings that are pulling on my ribs so I can take a deeper breath. I'm noticing this dog barking outside is really distracting me. So like, okay, I noticed it. Now I can come back. And then next one being empowerment and being in your center of gravity. And it's different in everybody and it changes during pregnancy, but finding your sense of empowerment of I am whole, I am complete, and I can experience things and I'm still whole and complete. So being present with that. And the next one is empathy. And I really wanted to include that so that we are more compassionate with those around us. I always really want to believe people are doing the best they can. And I also
Hmm.
hold true that people are in a lot of pain physically,
Hmm.
mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so it's that both and here's the Cartesian split again. It's both and. And so I want to be empathetic toward their lived experience. And it can be challenging. And also I can, you know, not take on their energy, which is the next one. So,
That is hard. That is
eh,
hard.
yeah, especially in hands-on healing. I learned from our tribe in this area is the Chumash tribe. And I have a friend who is a tribal leader and language teacher, and his family lineage was bone setting. And what they would
Hmm.
do is take a yucca thorn and do little tattoos, little dots around their wrists, and that was to protect the energy. So I didn't want to appropriate that with the tattoos. So when I was a young doctor, I wore maybe black obsidian or tourmaline, some
Hmm.
sort of bracelet on either hand as like a barrier reminder. I'm not going to take this patient's energy past my wrists.
Hmm.
And washing your hands is obviously good for hygiene, but it's an energetic cleanse. And there's days I have my like whole forearm up to my elbow running under that water. And as soon as I get done with patient care, I'm gonna run and take a shower just to get that energy off of me, send those soul fragments back to them, call mine back so that I'm staying empowered. I'm staying in my own energetic vibe because I don't need any of that. I've already been through enough. And so
Yeah.
but I'm empathetic. I'm sending that all back to them. So you don't want to take that energy on, and that's really hard with hands-on healing at times because you're literally feeling it. I'm moving bones, just the tissues changing under my hands.
Yeah.
And that's impacting, I mean, their epigenetics, like Bruce Lipton's work, right? And the environment. That's huge. But I'm just an advocate and facilitating that. That's not my energy. And then lastly is education. And, I went to school formally for 16 years. I don't even know, at least 25 certifications, um, and always learning. I'm not going to do
Yes.
any more. Probably not going to do any more big things when I have a family and, go to a different direction now. But being educated. And I really feel there's so much wisdom we can get from like lineage type, like traditional, whether it's like midwifery or hands on healing, bone setting. And also, I really feel like it's good to have the foundation. So, what I'll tell people if they're going to massage school, I'm like, learn all that and then kind of forget it because you need to learn how to palpate and feel it. And so, I think, again, it's the both and
Yes.
that's really powerful so that you can do things safely and use maybe modern wisdom and technology and research, but also have the wisdom passed down. So we have a balance of the masculine and the feminine energy coming through how we approach care.
Mic drop.
And those are my pillars.
Wow.
Boom.
I love all of them. The empathy and the energy and the education. Oh my gosh, all of it. I am a lifelong learner, I already know, and I'm still getting to know myself. I'm still getting to know, every day I'm learning and I'm loving it. And I think the day I stop learning will be the day I die. Like there's no reason to stop. And especially if I am somebody that's working to be a leader to teach others, I want to know everything that I can as up to date as I can to spread that knowledge, and I want to spread the wisdom, but I need to take the time in myself and develop my wisdom of my own body, my own psyche, my own spirit. And I think when you fully see yourself, you can fully see others. And like you said, everybody is doing their best.
Mhm.
Everybody is in mental pain, physical pain, emotional pain. Everybody's going through their own things, and everybody has at least two things in common: that they want to be happy and that they want to be loved and understood. So
Mhm.
when you come from that and you understand yourself, I think that is a huge part of being a leader, embodying. You have to find out who you are and what you believe in to embody yourself in front of the people that you are trying to lead. And so being conscious of that in everything, I think is really powerful, because I can question myself sometimes. Like, some of my opinions and, belief systems about how the world is and how I believe it should be are radical, I guess, compared to what is mainstream currently. But to me, it's unequivocal. And so it's hard for me to
Mhm.
sometimes go out there and speak on something when I have no idea how it's going to be received. But when I come back to myself and I embody the person that I am and the beliefs that I hold to be true, there is no other way to come out and speak. And there are no other things to say than what my soul is telling me to say. And the empathy is something I need to work on, because I do take on people's energy every day. And I would love to hear, I know you said you do the bracelets. Do you have any other practices that you like remind yourself not to take on the energy and stuff like that?
It's such a practice. I literally have to like tell myself not to take this on. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because I'll be seeing patients, they're like, sorry, just dump that all on you. And I'm like, it's okay. And that's like when they say that, that's a reminder. I'm like that's what I'm
You're like,
imagining is
yeah,
like
you're
all
right.
this energy. I'm like, nope, it's not going to my heart. I'm not taking it on. You're right. I don't have to because it's not mine.
Yeah.
I'm here to witness, and that's it. So it's like
Yeah.
this internal dialogue all the time. And like I said, the water helps. A salt bath is going to really help. I sometimes just remember like I'm a three-dimensional human. And to like protect myself, I'll put some lavender oil on my sternum, front of my heart
Yeah.
space, a little bit of peppermint on the back of my heart. So it tingles.
Oh.
And the lavender, I'm breathing in, it's like very like nice down regulating. I like that. But that'll help me remind me to breathe three-dimensionally into my rib cage and to just be present and embodied. And when I'm embodied and I'm present, I'm most likely not going to take on their energy.
Yeah. It's
So,
always,
couple
yeah.
practices.
Yeah. Practice. You're right. You're absolutely right. Um, what came to me as well where you were speaking is the way that we interact with people, and how a first impression can impact your relationship with somebody forever. Do you
Mm,
notice, without the visual cues that you used to have, that you are able to
mhm.
give people a chance to give you their own first impression, instead of you making one when you see that they only wear designer clothes, or, you know, whatever it may be? Do you find that it's freeing in a way?
I think so in a lot of ways. I mean, I still see I mean, I truly feel like I see their energy.
Yeah,
Um,
that's so
which is
true.
its own thing. And so sometimes I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know about that." But, that's again just be empathetic. Um, just witness inside. But yeah, I mean, I get a lot from their tone, and and people will meet me and they don't even realize, even though we're face to face, that I can't see them because I grew up and I know like normal facial expressions. If
Hmm.
you never can see, you're not going to have that input.
Yeah.
And so when we're interacting, I I forget, and a lot of people around me, especially people close to me, forget I can't see. And so it's really interesting. But first impressions, yeah, I'm going to go based on energy and tone and resonance. is there such a coherence here? And so I'm witnessing with like every part of me, every cell is noticing something.
Yeah.
And I might not be conscious, of that,
Hmm.
but my body's certainly recording it.
That's so accurate.
So yeah, I mean,
Absolutely. There have been people that
but you can still be. Sorry,
no,
go
but
ahead.
the I think a large part of the population doesn't think about energy because they don't pay attention to it, but it is absolutely there. And there have been people that
Mhm.
everyone in my life, everyone in my family, they're like, oh, what a great guy, what a great person. Oh, we're going to hang out with him. And for some reason, from the very first time meeting them, I was like, I just need to avoid that person. Like, there's something in me that like doesn't enjoy being near them. And it always turns out that it was a duplicitous, type of person or something like that. And, you know, at first it's trying to convince yourself, no, you're being silly. Nobody else sees that. But then it's learning to trust your own
Yeah.
intuition and your own sense of people's energies. And you're absolutely right. When I meet
Yeah.
somebody, I know immediately if they're going to be my friend. I know immediately. And I'll say it because life is too short not to say it. I think people are so insecure about it. I'm like, Elizabeth, you and I are friends now. Like, non-negotiable.
I love it. I love it. And and think about this too. What I was gonna say earlier is like when you meet somebody, you might be like, ew, like their voice is so annoying. And so you're noticing things that you're not seeing, right? You're taking that in. And
Yes.
so that we're all perceiving so much, but our eyes just hit it faster often. So
Hmm.
we live in such a visual world. But
Yeah, but
I
our
feel you
senses
with
make up
that. Like
for.
I'll connect with. Mhm. Yeah, they do, and they've done functional MRIs where your cells will migrate from one cortex to another when you lose or have a diminished sense, and I certainly feel that and notice it with my hearing and with my husband's touch and
Oh, I
everything.
bet.
But yeah, it's fun and it's overwhelming at times. So but I definitely will super connect with people, and I'm the person that'll be like, "This is my new best friend." Like, so when it
Exactly.
resonates, or I'll be like, "I'm gonna keep them as an acquaintance." But I'm the
Yeah.
same way as like what you were saying. I just feel it so quickly, and
Yeah.
it's intense.
It's beautiful. Absolutely. And I think you're right. Like as a hands-on practitioner, you probably have something that no common practitioner would have because you're not distracted by the visual sense and you're really like fully immersed in feeling what is going on with your patients. Both, energetically feeling and physically feeling what's going on in their body. And I think that's a superpower in its own right. So I'm so glad that you're able to make the
Yeah,
mark that you do
definitely.
on your patients every day. I know they're so grateful for you. And I think you also not just help them in general, but I think you teach them and hopefully people that are listening today that it's just as important to feel safe and comfortable with your doctor as it is to be treated by them.
Absolutely, and that is your right to feel
Yeah.
safe, because that's where healing is gonna take place when we're in a parasympathetic space, not all up in fight or flight or, all the other F words I always say within sympathetic dominance, so yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Elizabeth, we're at about an hour. I would love if you have any wisdom you want to share that you feel like people need to hear, or that maybe
Mm.
you wish you could tell your younger self.
Well, for you first, I just wanna share this quote because I think it's gonna resonate for everything you're doing. And this is a quote I personally I live and die by. This Gandhi quote is, "Intention without action is delusion." And I find that so powerful because that's balancing. The intention can be more the feminine energy, the action, the masculine. You need both
Yeah.
of them. to make a difference.
Wow.
And so that I find so helpful when making decisions. So intention without action is delusion. And I want to leave everyone with this quote from the founder of chiropractic that has always stuck with me. His name is D.D. Palmer. He founded chiropractic in 1895 in Davenport, Iowa. And he said, life is but the expression of spirit through matter. To make life manifest requires the union of spirit and body.
Holy cow. I've never heard
Right?
that before.
That's a
And that makes me want to be a chiropractor because it's absolutely, it's everything that I believe. And that is gorgeous.
Mm,
I love a good quote. Thank you so much. That's so awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's great.
Thank you for everything, Elizabeth. It was wonderful to meet you. I hope we stay in touch.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Wisniewski. You remind us that true leadership doesn't begin with power or productivity. It begins with presence. By listening to the language of our own bodies, we can return to that source of wisdom that no degree or title could ever give. That embodied awareness. If you'd like to learn more about Dr. Elizabeth's work, you can visit dreamplanet.org or connect with her on her Linktree, which I will put into the show notes. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who's learning to slow down and lead from within. We all need to trust ourselves a little bit more. Remember, your nervous system is your compass. Tune in and it will always lead you home. This is Shine In and Out, where science meets soul. And until next time, stay curious, stay embodied, and keep shining.